Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Ukrainian and US officials have said that Russia must demonstrate a serious commitment to peace as their talks in Miami enter a third day today, while European leaders weigh using frozen Russian assets to support Kyiv. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said that at the Doha Forum that the United States remains Europe's biggest ally, even as the Trump administration's new national security strategy that has been published yesterday labels Europe as over-regulated and suffering from civilizational erasure. The Canadian government has stated that it has removed Syria from its list of foreign state supporters of terrorism and removed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham as the group that spearheaded the rebel alliance that helped oust President Bashar al-Assad from its list of terrorist entities. Pakistan and Afghanistan has exchanged heavy fire along their border, killing at least 5 people. The clashes follow failed peace talks in Saudi Arabia that took place last week. India's Ministry of Civil Aviation has imposed temporary fare caps on affected airlines, including Indigo, to prevent unusually high pricing during the ongoing disruption, with authorities that will monitor compliance and take action against any violations. China warns Japan against reviving militarism as Tokyo boosts defense spending, eyes missile exports. China condemns Japan's prime minister for suggesting possible military action over Taiwan, accusing Tokyo of reviving dangerous militarism. Homeowners at Hong Kong's Wang Fuk Court were wrongly assured that Prestige Construction had a clean safety record. Despite multiple past violations, the deadly November fire has exposed failures in oversight, enforcement, and contractor accountability. China's officials say the country will work with the United States on salient global narcotics issues based on the principles of equality and mutual respect, as authorities on both sides are implementing consensus reached between China-US leaders in Busan, South Korea. Now we start this hour with Ukraine. Ukrainian officials confirmed that Russia has launched a massive overnight drone and missile strike on Ukraine, targeting power stations, heating facilities, and railways across 8 regions. The attacks damaged a railway hub near Kyiv, destroying depots and several carriages, though no casualties have been reported. According to reports, Ukrainian forces intercepted most of the incoming weapons, downing 585 drones and 30 missiles out of 653 drones and 51 missiles launched. Critical energy infrastructure in Chernihiv, Zaporizhia, Lviv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Odessa regions was hit, leaving thousands without electricity, heat, or water. Port facilities in Odessa also lost power, forcing operators to rely on backup generators. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha has condemned the strikes as attacks on civilian infrastructure, stressing that no measures to strengthen Ukraine should be delayed. Emergency repair teams are working to restore services safely, while several suburban train services near Kyiv and Chernihiv remain cancelled due to the damage. Let's listen in to the CEO of Ukraine's state railway company.
Влучання були безпосередньо по вокзалу. Влучання було по приміському депо, це навіть не депо, де обслуговуються електропоїзди, чи це не депо, де обслуговуються локомотиви, це депо, де обслуговуються електропоїзди. Електрички по-простому, виключно сполучення приміське, яке Київ і Київська область сполучають між собою. Також було влучання підступне по диспетчерському нашому центру. Руйнування будівель, ви бачите, вони критичні, але я впевнений, що ми відбудуємо, будуть модульні конструкції, далі буде сучасний, відновлено вокзал, але ми зараз не про велике якесь відновлення, сьогодні важливо прагматично створити умови для людей.
Now, for this discussion, we welcome Professor Vasilin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, now looking at this, how might this U.S. proposal involving territorial concessions, how do you think this affects Ukraine's political standing and long-term sovereignty? What other commercial or economic incentives could be tied to a potential changing peace framework?
Ukraine is defending its territory. It will not give up any concession and any kilometer of its territory. For Ukraine, it's a fight for survival. They know that if they give up now, after 1 year, Russia will demand another 4 regions. So there is absolutely clarity in Ukraine, but also in the European countries, that an aggressor should not be rewarded with anything. In fact, aggressor should be punished with reparations, with war tribunals and everything else, what happens during the history of war of aggression. So absolutely no concessions. European will help Ukraine to defend its territory. Whatever Donald Trump is talking, it's irrelevant because Ukraine is not going to surrender. Europeans are very much behind that. They are supporting Ukraine. As you mentioned, another night of a lot of strikes, drones, missiles, but nevertheless, Ukrainians are as committed as ever to defend their territories. Obviously, they are polite with the United States. They are listening. They want to talk to Washington and consider potentially some dialogue with Russia, but on a very firm term. There are red lines, no territorial concessions, territorial integrity and political independence of Ukraine must be absolutely recognized. It's United Nations Charter, international law, the principles of international law, and countries are very united behind all of this. Now, if there is a possibility of a ceasefire on the line of combat now, that could be considered as a first step to a peace deal. That's something that can be discussed. Simply ceasefire, no, both sides agree not to shoot anymore from where they stand at the moment. And from that line, future negotiations could be discussed and potential security guarantee. But all this is a long process, so we need to wait and see.
And you know, what political risks does Ukrainian negotiators face in engaging with both U.S. and through U.S. to Moscow amid disagreement over key parts of the proposal? And how do you think, how can U.S. and Ukraine encourage Russian cooperation?
Well, they should encourage Russian cooperation mostly by sanctions. Frozen assets should be given to Ukraine. There could be a blockade of Kaliningrad. Yes, the language against Russia should be very firm, uncompromising, effectively saying stop the fire. Otherwise, we will increase sanctions, we will increase pressure, and we will not negotiate with Kremlin if they don't stop the fire. Kremlin denied many times the ceasefire all over the last 10.5 months. And we also see that Moscow rejected the revised plan, which was submitted by Witkov and Kushner in Moscow. So it's very clear who is not cooperating, and for that matter, there should be a strong language of demands, ultimatums, threatening Russia for more sanctions, for more frozen assets, and yeah, that should simply continue. And more support for Ukraine, actually. Remember how much Russians were scared when Lukoil and Rosneft sanctions were mentioned, even not even imposed, but just mentioned by Donald Trump. So similar measures are very necessary as to make Russia comply with negotiations, so that there is no point to negotiate with Russia without pressure. The only way is to make Russia feeling the heat and the necessity to negotiate. Otherwise, they will never negotiate.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Veselin Popovsky for always joining us and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we stay on this topic. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has honored troops and families on Ukraine's Armed Forces Day in Kyiv. He has presented posthumous awards to families of fallen soldiers and recognized serving personnel for their bravery. Zelensky also visited a hospital, congratulating wounded soldiers and medics, thanking them for their service and wishing them a speedy recovery. Military leaders, including Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal and Armed Forces Commander Alexander Syrskyi, joined the ceremony as soldiers observed a moment of silence to honor the fallen. Let's listen in.
Просто немає нікого у світі, хто міг би дозволити собі не зважати на нас, на нашу державу. І навіть ті у світі, хто все ще не вірить в Україну, або просто недостатньо знає про нашу державу, все одно змушені рахуватись із тим, як відреагує Україна. Масштабної війни і після років гібридної війни, так що зараз це багато в чому взірець для небагато держав у світі мають таку вагу, ще менше, значно менше могли б реально вистояти проти таких ударів, таких ворожих ударів, штурмів, такої підлості, від яких Україна реально захищається щодня, захищається щоночі.
Now we move the focus on to Middle East. Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has said on Saturday that Hamas's disarmament cannot be the immediate priority in Gaza as mediators work to advance the second stage of a peace deal for the war-torn Palestinian territory. Responding to questions about whether Hamas should give up its weapons, Fidan has argued that such a step is not realistic at this phase and must be sequenced properly within a broader political process. Let's listen in.
We look at the peace plan for Gaza. You know, there are phases, and now when we move up to second phase, hopefully we have to have certain things happen first. First of all, we need to, you know, the Hamas is ready to hand over the administration of Gaza to a technical Palestinian committee, a political one. So the names are, I think, is already determined and handed over the interested parties. So first of all, we need to see that the Palestinian committee of technical people are taking over the administration of Gaza. Then we need to see that the police force is being formed to police Gaza, again from the Palestinians, not Hamas, but non-Hamas Palestinians, vetted and trained, and they should be in place. When we first start talking about just only disarming Hamas at the first phase, I mean, it may not be a realistic and doable objective just a start. We first need to implement certain concrete steps.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Sol Sadka. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Sol, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how can mediators balance the goal to disarming Hamas with the need for realistic and achievable peace process in Gaza? In your analysis now, what is realistic?
Realistically, there's no chance at all that the relics, the remnants of Hamas, a couple of thousand fighters and their weapons, are going to voluntarily disarm. That's a realistic fact. Realistically, the only way they can be disarmed is if someone else comes in and disarms them. And that will be done only by violence, unfortunately. The only people that are willing to do that at all are Israel. And now that Israel has got all the hostages and all but one of the bodies back, they themselves have no particular motivation to do that either. It's really not worth spending blood and money to fight the remnants of Hamas, even for Israel. And if it's not worth it for Israel, it's certainly not worth it for anybody else. Not for the Americans, not for the Turks, not for any of the Arab nations, nobody. So realistically, there is no prospect of Hamas being disarmed in the immediate future. If that happens, I will simply be amazed, and so would everyone else who has looked at the thing carefully.
So what do you think, how should the sequencing of disarmament and broader political negotiations be structured to make being realistic and ensuring that there is a lasting stability there?
Unfortunately, I have to break the bad news that I don't really suspect anything to improve beyond what is essentially the status quo situation, where you have Hamas controlling a portion of Gaza, about 40% of it, and Israel controlling about 60% of it, all of that land essentially being empty of civilians and full of rubbled buildings. I don't see in the near future how that gets changed unless the Gazan people themselves find a way to rise up against their oppressive Hamas regime. That's a possibility. It could be that the Israelis have a plan to arm local factions who will eventually, perhaps after a period of years, be strong enough to rival Hamas on the battlefield and push them out gradually from the territory they still control. But only time will tell in that regard. Right now, there's no tremendous signs on the ground of that happening. And whether the Israelis pull back another kilometer here or go forward another kilometer is not material to the prospects of actual peace. Peace certainly isn't realistic at this stage. However, a continued truce might be.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Solsadka, for sharing that realistic insight from Tel Aviv. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay in the region. Syrian interim President Ahmad al-Sharaa has warned at the Doha Forum that Israel's push for a demilitarized zone in southern Syria risks pushing both countries towards a dangerous place. His remarks come as Israeli forces continue to occupy the UN-patrolled buffer zone in the Golan Heights and carries out repeated military operations deeper into Syrian territory. Despite ongoing direct talks between the two sides, Sharaa has stressed the importance of preserving the 1974 disengagement agreement, calling it a framework that has held for over 50 years and remains the cornerstone of stability along the frontier. He has cautioned that altering this long-standing arrangement or seeking new terms such as a demilitarized zone could destabilize an already volatile region.
أصرت على أن يكون على احترامها لاتفاق 1974 وهذا اتفاق صمد لأكثر من 50 سنة فهو اتفاق بشكل أو آخر كان اتفاق ناجح فالعبث في هذا الاتفاق رغم أنه يعني يحصل على إجماع دولي وإجماع مجلس الأمن والبحث عن اتفاقات أخرى كمنطقة عازلة أو ما شابه ذلك فأعتقد أن هذا ربما يدخلنا في مكان خطر لا نعلم ما الذي سيجري خلاله ربما ينجح هذا الأمر أو لا ينجح.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Solsadka. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Sol, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, what role does this 1974 disengagement agreement still play after 5 decades in maintaining peace along Syria-Israel frontier?
Well, what happened, if you recall, in 1974 is a ceasefire agreement was reached following the Yom Kippur War, which was the fourth war between Israel and Syria. And it was the second time that the Syrians attempted to take control of the heights and conquer northern Israel. They failed again, and Israel pushed them back to within about 30 kilometers of their capital, Damascus. And the ceasefire line held, and has held for 50 years, right up until the fall of the Assad regime. There are people who argue that the fall of the previous regime void the agreement, but in any case, there's really no stomach in Israel for allowing jihadist groups, which many people suspect al-Sharaa might be still tied to, although he disclaims any link to them, but he has been that his whole life, time will tell, to allow them to mass on Israel's border. Israel intends to maintain a defense in depth, and that is to say, they intend to maintain a certain depth within any kind of potential hostile territory, such as southern Syria, to protect its own civilians. But not only to protect his own civilians. If you recall, a couple of months ago, there were extensive massacres by the Jolani regime against the Druze minority, and the Druze are allied with Israel and have been for 80 years. Israel protects the Druze population within its territory, and the Druze serve in the Israeli army, and is in Israel's interest in every regard, not just from a humanitarian perspective, but from a geopolitical perspective, to ensure that the relatives of its allies within its own country are protected by them. And as a result, Israel has maintained a policy over the past couple of months to ensure that no further incursions from the Jilani regime into the Druze territory will be accepted. It could be that after a few years, if the Jilani regime proves stable, unfortunately there's evidence that it isn't, and it might fall apart any minute. There's rumors that his regime is extremely fragile, despite being propped up by various Arab states and the USA to some degree. It's unclear how strong he is. If he manages to pull Syria together, then at that point, it might be possible to talk about making a genuine peace deal between Israel and Syria. My guess is that a final border will only ever be agreed between Israel and Syria on the basis of some division of the 1974 line, with Hermon Mountain being the border. But we will see. In any case, the Syrians have absolutely no leverage over Israel. They don't have any serious military equipment that they can use against them, and so all their threats are entirely void. Any attempt by the Jilani regime to attack Israel would simply leave a trail of wrecked jeeps approaching the Israeli border. Israel's not scared of Syria, but at the same time, they're not going to allow Syria to be used as a buffer, as a launch pad to attack its own civilians or the Druze allies who are in southern Syria. And that is a hard red line for Israel, and nobody really has any leverage to force Israel to compromise on that red line.
That is so interesting and insightful. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Sol Sadka for joining us today as a political commentator from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Iran. Moving to Iran now, where official authorities have arrested 2 organizers of a marathon that took place on the Kyiv island after several images emerged online of women participating in the event without their hijabs. Now, Iran has a state-mandated legal norm which dictates that all Iranian girls and women above the age of 9 to wear head veils in public. According to the Iran's Judiciary Online website, 2 of the main organizers were arrested on warrants. One of them was an official from the Kyiv Free Zone, while the other worked for a private company that had organized the race yesterday. Now, Friday's race saw close to 500 people competing, where a number of female runners were there without their headscarves. As now, a criminal case has been filed against all the officials and agents who were involved in organizing the event. Now we move on to South America. The U.S. Department of War has released a video showing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth expressing support for Admiral Bradley, who ordered multiple strikes on a suspected Venezuelan drug smuggling vessel in September. The video comes after at least 19 strikes carried out by the U.S. military since September, targeting alleged drug vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific coasts of Latin America. These strikes have resulted in the deaths of at least 76 people, while Hegseth backs the strikes. Critics have raised concerns about their legality, and both Republican and Democratic lawmakers have pledged to investigate further. Let's listen in to what Pete Hegseth has shared.
The only thing I've actually cared about in the whole process was communicating to Admiral Bradley and everybody else up and down the chain. Hey man, I got your back. You made the call. I would have made the same call. It was the right call, and we're going to back you up all the way. That's what we want communicated for all of you, and our job is to give you those clear missions to just go execute. So from my family to all of yours, thank you for everything you do. We're just deeply grateful. I wish every American could see this and how you guys drive. It makes me proud, and we exist to serve you.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Martin Tsai. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Ecuador. Thank you very much, Martin, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how do these targets on alleged narcotic carrying boats by U.S. It has resulted in at least 76 deaths. How do you think this is affecting Venezuela and U.S.'s relationship?
You said this is alleged drug trafficking votes. It's not 100% confirmed. The U.S. and specifically the Trump administration is thinking or assuming they are part of this drug system of the Cartel de los Soles. And obviously, the U.S. has all of the right to defend itself, but the problem here is that they didn't get any real or authentic proof that this is going on. Everything is so not formal, and they think that these boats are carrying drug dealers, when in fact there's a lot of boats that have been targeted, that they have been carrying fishers. So this is very concerning because the U.S. has a very strong tradition of the respect of the rule of law, of the fair trial, of a fair investigation. I think right now, not only Democrats, but also a lot of people in the Democratic Party, in the Republican Party, they are very concerned about how the judicial system in the U.S. is working and if it is really separated from politics.
Yes, and also U.S. talking about U.S.'s judiciary system and fairness. It seems like President Trump's administration pushes what they want to push as a rhetoric instead of fact-checking. What's your take on this current issue? Do you think this should be proved that these boats do carry narcotics?
Of course. I mean, if you're going to start a war against narco and this drug dealing, you must be sure, and you must be 100% sure and get like real facts and real proofs in order to carry out these actions. If you carry out these actions, killing 70 people without a real proof, this is very concerning because, as I said, the U.S. has a strong background of respecting the law. And what is very concerning is the double standard. In one side, Donald Trump is carrying out a war against drug trafficking in South America, and at the same time, he's pardoning the former president of Honduras who was charged of drug dealing in the U.S. So this seems very political in my eyes, and this needs to be investigated because otherwise the rule of law in the U.S. will be in a great danger.
Yes, and Martin, lastly, what do you think is motive of U.S. current continuous target of these Venezuelan boats and Venezuela overall?
Well, in my opinion, I think this is a very geopolitical fight of national interests more than a fight against drug trafficking. I mean, Donald Trump, in his own words, once said in front of the media that if he was Biden, he would have taken all of the oil of Venezuela. So I think a lot of political issues are taking place here, and also like the strategic region that Venezuela means for the world. Like they have the biggest amount of oil in the world. They have a very strategic location in the world for in the case of a third world war. So I think Trump is really caring about the supremacy of the U.S. in the world, in my opinion, more than drug trafficking. As I said, it doesn't make sense that he released a very big criminal and drug dealer, the former president of Honduras, and at the same time he's fighting Venezuela. It doesn't make sense. It's a double standard, in my opinion.
Yes, 100%. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Martin Sairites for joining us as an international affairs expert from Ecuador. Thank you very much. Now we move on to India. According to reports, Indian and U.S. investigators are set to meet next week in Washington to review data from the tragic crash of Air India flight AI-171. The crash, which killed nearly everyone on board and many on the ground, occurred after both engines lost thrust shortly after takeoff. Investigators from India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau and the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board will analyze the flight data and cockpit voice records. Preliminary findings point to the fuel control switches being moved to the cut-off position, but the cause remains uncertain. Speculation around deliberate pilot action or a technical malfunction is still ongoing. The meeting aims to combine expertise and resolve key questions surrounding the crash's cause. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.